Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is Mine by Robert R. McCammon. Now, Mine was published in 1990, and Robert R. McCammon is one of the most criminally underrated authors out there, in my opinion. He also wrote books like Swan Song and Boy's Life and Usher's Passing. Now, the plot of Mine is it focuses on two main characters. One character named Mary Terrell, who goes by the nickname Mary Terror, and another character named Laura Claiborne. Now, this woman, Mary Terrell, or Mary Terror, you find out in the book, back in the late 60s and early 70s, she was the member of a radical group called the Stormfront Brigade, who were responsible for a lot of murders and terrorist bombings, and they were led by a man who called himself Lord Jack, and you realize that this woman, Mary, was absolutely in love with this guy, Jack, and he got her pregnant, but something ended up happening where she ended up having a miscarriage, and now it's years later, and, and now the Stormfront Brigade, like, most of them are dead now, and she's in hiding now, living under an alias, because she's, of course, wanted by the FBI, but, you realize now that she's completely psychotic, even more psychotic than she was when she was a young woman. And now she's convinced that this guy, Jack, is still alive and that he wants her to bring him a child. The other main character in the book is a woman named Laura Claiborne, who is about to give birth to a baby boy, but right before she's about to give birth to this baby, she finds out that her husband has been cheating on her, so right now it seems like her life is kind of starting to fall apart, but what she doesn't realize is it's about to get a lot worse, because she gives birth to this baby, and then essentially this character, Mary, ends up kidnapping her baby from the hospital, and when Laura finds out who this woman is, and it seems like the FBI are kind of failing to find this woman, Laura essentially takes matters into her own hands, and she goes out looking for Mary, trying to find her so she can get her baby back, and that's the basic plot line of Mine. Now, Mine is an excellent book in my opinion. I absolutely loved this book, and I loved pretty much everything I've read from Robert McCammon so far. I mean, I've only read a few books by him so far. Like, I've read this, I've read Swan Song and Usher's Passing and Boy's Life, so I've only read a few of his books, but pretty much everything I've read from him has been really top-notch in terms of writing and storytelling and character development, and I saw an interview with Robert McCammon once where he was talking about how if you're a writer, you have to believe that what you're writing, that whatever book you're writing will be the greatest book ever written, and I feel like that philosophy is really the reason why pretty much every book I've read from him so far has been as good as it actually has been. Now, I really liked the character of Laura in this book. She's a character who you definitely sympathize with because she's a mother who had her child taken from her, and throughout the book you're rooting for her to finally get her baby back, and you really feel her need to, finally get her child back, and you really feel for this character, even before she actually gets her baby taken from her. Even before that, you realize that her husband has been cheating on her, and, and when her parents find out, they do not help at all. Her mother is even trying to convince her to stay with her husband, even though she now wants a divorce, so she's a character who seems like she's definitely put up with a lot of shit from people for too long now, and now getting her baby taken from her is pretty much like the last straw, essentially. So she's a very sympathetic character in that regard. And honestly, she's a really good protagonist. She's a character who you're definitely rooting for throughout the whole book. And then, of course, you have the character of Mary, who's the antagonist in the book, and she's such a disturbing character. But in a weird way, you do almost sympathize with her, because in a way, she's almost like a victim of herself in a way, because you realize that she's completely lost in her own world, and when she kidnaps Laura's baby, she convinces herself that this is her baby, like her and Lord Jack's baby. You know, so she's a character who, in a way, you can't help but to feel some sympathy for her, because she's kind of lost or trapped in her own world, but at the same time, you are still rooting for Laura to, you know, get her baby back and put a stop to this woman. You know, you realize just how psychotic Mary really is, and you also realize that when she was a young woman and she was part of the Stormfront Brigade, she was pretty much brainwashed by this guy, Lord Jack. And Lord Jack's an interesting character because, you know, essentially, you don't even know throughout the book if he's even still alive or not up until towards the end of the book, but Mary has convinced herself that this guy is still alive and that he wants her to bring him this child. Now, one thing that's really cool about Mine is not just is it a great thriller, but there's actually quite a bit of social commentary in this book as well. Like, in the book, there's a lot of commentary on how much society has changed since the 1960s, but also how much society hasn't changed since the 1960s. Like, there's a part of this book where Laura is thinking to herself about, you know, how back in the 1960s she was a hippie and she took part in a lot of anti-war demonstrations, but now she's not sure if she won't be the one calling the police if there's somebody protesting something. Like, you know, it talks a lot about how society in a way has almost been beaten into submission, pretty much. Like, you know, it talks about how, you know, really as people get older, they seem less willing to, you know, actually do something about a lot of the issues that are going on in society. So I feel like there's a lot of commentary on that. But in this book, there's also a lot of commentary on kind of the dark side of the hippie movement. And the book doesn't say, like, the hippie movement was bad or anything. Like, it basically talks about how there was good and bad. Like, there were people who were out there protesting and genuinely wanting to do some good for society and change the world. But then there was people who took this way too far and committed terrorist actions in order to achieve their goals. So there's a lot of commentary on that in the book. But overall, Mine is a really good book, and I highly recommend it if you haven't read it already. And if you're a fan of The Doors, you might appreciate a lot of The Doors references that are in this book. Like, in this book, there's a lot of references to lyrics from songs by The Doors, and also in the book, Mary is absolutely obsessed with Jim Morrison, so much so that she actually continuously refers to him as God. And there are even parts of this book, now Mary, she takes a lot of acid, so there are parts of this book where she hallucinates Jim Morrison coming to her, but every time he comes to her, and he's described as God because she views him as God pretty much, you know, which I thought was very interesting. Now, so far, none of Robert McCammon's books have ever been made into a movie, with the exception of, I think one of his short stories was made into something for television, but there has never been, like, a theatrical movie made based on any of his books. But apparently Frank Darabont, the guy who directed movies like The Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, and The Mist, he apparently for years has been wanting to make a movie based on this book, and I'm a huge Frank Darabont fan, so That would be freaking awesome if he did that. And I know Frank Darabont, there are like 3 projects I know Frank Darabont really wants to get off the ground. I know he really wants to do a movie based on the Stephen King book, The Long Walk. He wants to do a movie based on Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, and apparently he really wants to do a movie based on this book, and my god, I really hope he's able to get that project off the ground, because honestly, this would make a really cool movie. And Frank Darabont, he's one of those people who is really good at doing book adaptations. Like, honestly, I think he should have the rights to every book, pretty much, because, like, if I was a writer and I found out that Frank Darabont was making one of my books into a movie, I could pretty much be sure that it will end up being a good movie. But yeah, that's my review on Mine by Robert McCammon, and bye.